Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. The First Nations Child and Family Caring Society is once again before the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal in Ottawa. This time the organization is taking the federal government to task for failing to process Jordan's principal claims in a timely manner. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
Former Associate Deputy Minister for Indigenous Services Valerie Gideon was before the tribunal on Tuesday. She said one thing that might help the government meet the backlog of Jordan's principal requests is increasing First Nations capacity to assist in processing claims.
I think the extent to which First Nations could participate in the determination of requests is something that would, first of all, alleviate, obviously, the volume of requests that would come to the federal government, but it would also be more aligned in the pathway to self-determination.
Jordan's principal says First Nations kids are supposed to be able to receive health, social, and educational supports when they need them, regardless of whether they live within a federal, provincial, or territorial jurisdiction. First Nations Family and Caring Society says Ottawa continues to fail to meet the standard and First Nations children are dying because of it. Documents discussed at the hearing show that government is failing to process requests on time in about 35% of cases.
We want Canada to abide by its legal orders so that kids stop being hurt and kids don't die unnecessarily. I mean, one of the things we're hearing a lot about in that room today is a lot of procedural stuff for the government, how these are operational concerns for the government. What we're not hearing is what's happening at the ground for kids.
For her part, tribunal adjudicator Sophie Marshallton told the hearing the status quo clearly isn't working, and it is incumbent upon all parties to do better.
Surely there's a better way moving forward, and I personally will ask every single party to dream the best scenario that they've ever dreamed of, and to review the requested orders, thinking we need solutions now, and we also need solutions in the long term.
The hearing continues on all week. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is continuing his pre-budget tour. He was in Winnipeg on Thursday to unveil the government's plan to tackle Canada's housing crisis. Sierra Bettens has the story.
At an apartment complex in Winnipeg, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the upcoming budget will include $1.5 billion for a new Canada Rental Protection Fund to preserve and expand affordable housing.
The Canada Rental Protection Fund will aim to mobilize investments and financing from the charitable sector, private sector, and other orders of government in order to maximize the ability to acquire and protect affordable housing.
The fund will provide $1 billion in loans and $470 million in contributions to nonprofits, charitable organizations, and other housing partners to build and preserve affordable rental units. Currently, less than 4% of the housing stock in Canada is social housing.
People are being priced out of their communities, and that's not okay. So we have to help nonprofits and community partners acquire units and preserve rents at a stable level.
Of course, it's not just cities feeling the housing crunch. In March, a report by Auditor General Karen Hogan found that the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation relied on outdated data from 2001 to determine funding for its regional offices. As a result, First Nations housing in the Prairie provinces was underfunded by $274 million. When asked whether the First Nations would be compensated, Prime Minister Trudeau did not directly answer the question.
We're going to continue to work with Indigenous communities right across the country to meet the tremendous housing needs that we know are faced by communities. That's why we stepped up significantly with billions of dollars in Indigenous, particularly First Nations and Métis housing, why we're going to continue to work to make sure that we're building those homes across the prairies and indeed across the country for Indigenous communities.
Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The Assembly of Nova Scotia Chiefs are calling for an emergency meeting with the Minister of Fisheries. They say fisheries officers left 2 Mi'kmaq fishers with no footwear in the middle of the night hours from home. Angel Moore reports.
About 50 people, including Mi'kmaq fishers, community leaders, and supporters, gathered at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Regional Office in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, to peacefully protest against the actions of fisheries officers. Two Mi'kmaq fishermen, Blaise Siliboy of the Eskazoni First Nation and Kevin Hartling of the Membertou First Nation, say the officers left them with no phones and no shoes in the middle of the night at a gas station in Shelburne, Nova Scotia, about 200 kilometers southeast of Halifax.
Yes, we told them that we were not from the area. We were from Cape Breton, and we had no way to contact anyone without our phones. I even asked them if they could supervise me while I looked through my contacts on my phone so I could get a hold of someone, and they refused to do that as well.
Elvers can sell for up to $5,000 a kilogram. However, last month, DFO canceled the elver fishery, citing a need to conserve the species and because of safety reasons. Hartling and Siliboy say on March 26, just before midnight, they were arrested by fisheries officers for unauthorized elver fishing. They seized their gear, including their cell phones and wading boots.
I even told him, you can cut the boots and like, just give me the boots. I'll wear them. And he was like, no, if I do that, I can't. That'll be like there'll be no investigation. I say, yeah, I understand, but like right now I have no shoes, man.
According to the two Mi'kmaq fishermen, fisheries officers drove them to the Irving gas station in Shelburne, Nova Scotia. Siliboy was shocked they were left wearing their socks with no footwear.
Like I told him, like, you're really gonna leave me here with no shoes at the Irving station? He said, you know the consequences, man. He said that's your fault. And I was just like, man, like why would you leave somebody like that?
Hartling and Siliboy say they started walking with cardboard and plastic wrapped around their feet, donated by the clerk at the gas station. It was about 7 degrees Celsius with drizzle and fog.
I couldn't wait outside the Irving station. If I waited outside the Irving station, I could have frozen to death. Like it was cold out.
Along the highway, the fishers say they came across a clothing bin. They helped themselves and wrapped their feet with clothes. After walking a few more hours, a car picked them up and drove them back to Shelburne. Siliboy called for help. Hartling says the experience was terrible.
People even put shoes on their dogs in the wintertime for they don't get salt and shit in their feet. We didn't even have that.
A statement from the Minister of Fisheries, Diane Lebotier's office, confirms 2 people were arrested and released in Shelburne County on March 26th. And we are taking the situation extremely seriously. DFO has launched an investigation into it and is also in touch with community leadership. As this matter is under an investigation, it would be inappropriate to comment further at this time. Chief Bob Glode of the Millbrook First Nation was at the protest. He said the officers' actions were unacceptable.
Well, the first thing we were looking for is for those individuals who are responsible to immediately be fired from DFO and be held accountable for their actions. The next thing we need to do is continue to emphasize to DFO that our rights supersede the DFO regulations and rules and regulations in regards to how they manage the fisheries.
The Mi'kmaq fishers and supporters made their way to the location where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was holding a press conference and made sure they were heard. Trudeau was asked how his government would be accountable.
I think the first step is making sure there's a full investigation into what happened. And then as the facts are made clear, there will need to be consequences and responses.
Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, also called Halifax.
Nunavut is celebrating its 25th birthday. We'll take in some of the festivities after the break. Welcome back. This week, Nunavut's capital celebrated an important anniversary, the territory's 25th birthday. Trevor Wright brings us this.
Evening, the government of Nunavut held a community celebration to celebrate the passage of the Nunavut Act on April 1st, 1999. It separated Nunavut from the Northwest Territories. Performances, Inuit country food, and keynote addresses from special guests were all part of the festivities.
We can take pride in how we have moved our territory forward in the last 25 years. As we know that there is still more to be done.
Nunavut MP Lori Idlout echoed that optimism, saying despite facing continued adversity, Inuit will continue to persevere.
Because despite all the hardships that we're going to continue to experience, we can still have hope for our future.
Nunavut Premier PJ Akyoguk said the devolution agreement signed earlier this January is a sign that the territory's future will be its own.
In the past, too many decisions about us were made without us. With the signing of this historic agreement, we could now bring decision-making a lot closer to home, right here in Nunavut. Upinnato Tamannan.
As part of the Nunavut's 25th anniversary celebrations, Governor General Mary Simon gave John Amorgalic a medal. As earlier in the day, she promoted him from a member to an officer of the Order of Canada in a private ceremony. Amorgalic is known as the father of Nunavut for leading negotiations and the implementation of the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement.
The impact of his contributions extend well beyond Nunavut. He helped shape our federation. John is a Canadian hero.
Trevor Wright, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Big congrats to John there too. This past Easter Sunday, a sacred covenant was signed between a First Nation in British Columbia and the Archdiocese of Vancouver. APTN's Tina House has that story.
In March of 2022, a delegation from Canada, including residential school survivors and Indigenous leaders such as Cookbee Roseanne Casimir from Kamloops to Secwepemc, traveled to Rome, Italy for a private audience with Pope Francis. That historic trip concluded with an apology from the Pope over the atrocities committed at residential schools.
I brought forth messages directly from survivors, as well as the realities of representing a First Nation now charged with the aftermath of a residential school, the sacred care of missing children in unmarked graves. I went to Rome with hope of building meaningful steps towards reconciliation while seeking justice in whatever form the families of the missing children seek.
And almost 2 years later, since that trip to Italy, here to Kamloops to Secwepemc, where the initial 215 unmarked graves were first discovered in May of 2021, a special ceremony took place between the Archdiocese of Vancouver and the First Nation on Easter Sunday. Witnesses were blanketed and brushed off as the signing of the Sacred Covenant took place.
To sign a sacred covenant with the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Vancouver is to enact important steps of contrition, be it confirming historical records, sharing truths, and commitments to action. To sign it on Easter Sunday is a symbolic and significant step forward.
A few of the highlights of the covenant include the Church's commitment to help honor and memorialize former students of the Kamloops Residential School, creating more easy searchable tools to find documents, and the Church has retained scientific experts who have worked around the world to help identify those in the unmarked graves.
Truly, the residential school system did do great damage to Indigenous people, especially to their language, their customs, and their traditions. Unquestionably, the Church was wrong in implementing a government colonialist policy, which resulted in devastation for many children, families, and communities. We recognize as Catholics, as the Catholic Church, our part in the resulting tragedies. But now we wish to journey with the people of the Kamloops Nation on a path to greater healing, more understanding, increased respect.
The Archbishop says all records from the Archdiocese of Vancouver have been turned over so that families can finally find out the truth of what happened to their lost children and relatives. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
In 2021, APTN told you about 2 women from Whitefish Lake First Nation in Alberta, and they were suing the band for not being allowed to vote or run for chief or council in elections. With an election coming up, APTN's Chris Stewart has an update on if they now can run.
Oh, okay.
Karen McCarthy has never voted in Whitefish Lake First Nation elections. As a child of a mother who married a non-Indian, Karen did not have status. In 1985, Bill C-31 was passed. It allowed women who married non-Indians to keep their status and participate in elections. But Whitefish Lake First Nation never updated their election code to allow C-31ers to vote.
They picked and choose who could vote, and because my family were Bill C-31s, we were not allowed to vote. So in 2020, I decided to challenge our election, and out of that, it was a judicial review that I requested based on the fact that it's discrimination against my mother's generation, my generation, and my children's generation.
Lorna Jackson also was not allowed to vote or run for leadership because she was in a common law relationship. She had wanted to run for council and possibly for chief.
In the past 3 years, I was, encouraged by family and everybody else to get married, get ready for the next election. And I'm like, no. I'm not going to be one of the statistics to get married just to, be part of leading our community. I believe you don't need to be married. Like I've been, 11 years with my common law, I'm sure it proves that I'm committed to this relationship.
She also went to court saying it was discrimination. Whitefish Lake First Nation is part of Saddle Lake Cree Nation, which did amend their election code in 2017 after a court case. Whitefish Lake did not follow suit. In 2023, a judicial review concluded that preventing members from voting was discrimination, and the band amended their election code.
It was a slam dunk case. There's so much precedent that was set. There was very little legal or reasons to exclude us as because we are full band members under the Indian Act, and being a Section 11 band where everyone on the general list is a full band member.
Lorna Jackson is running for council for the first time on April 12th.
I'm really excited. I just want to do right by my people, for my people, and give them that voice. That was always just that voice to be heard, to be listened to.
And Karen McCarthy is looking forward to being a first-time voter.
So a week ago, I went to one of the organizations that has posted our voters list in Edmonton, and I went to check so I was told my name was on there, but I had to see for myself. So I saw my name, and I saw my son and my daughter's name. So that, that really hit home. I felt very, very proud of myself.
APTN spoke to Chief Stan Houle, who had no comment on the story, and says he is not running for re-election on April 19th. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Some small but meaningful changes have been made at Algonquin College in Ottawa. That story and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. This year marks the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and although the anniversary isn't until June 6th, the Royal Regina Rifles are unveiling a new statue that will be flown to Normandy to honor the sacrifices of the soldiers who stormed the beaches that day. Rachel May has more on the 2 public viewings of the statue in Saskatchewan.
The 8-foot bronze statue of a Regina rifleman will be on display in Regina on April 6th at the Legislative Building. The statue commemorates all those who fought with the regiment on D-Day. Royal Regina Rifles were in the first wave who stormed the beaches and with help from the Royal Canadian Artillery liberated the town of Bretteville, according to historical records. Kelsey Loney works with the Royal Regina Rifles Trust as a military historian.
The contributions of Indigenous veterans have really been overlooked for a long time.
Papeeksi's First Nation sent 40 soldiers to help not just on D-Day, but during the Second World War. The statue is set to make a stop on Papeeksi's in late April before being flown to France and being put in a memorial to the Regina Rifles Regiment in Bretteville.
We are so proud to include the Indigenous perspective on this story, and it's just an incredible piece of our provincial history that can promote reconciliation.
The statue is set to have its official unveiling in France on June 5th. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Algonquin College continues to indigenize its Ottawa campus. It's part of a commitment to reconciliation that began a few years ago. Here's Annette Francis with more.
The first step of the indigenization strategy has concluded. Interior murals and signage in the Anishinaabe language now adorn the hallways of Algonquin College's C building. Shayna Shawaganabe is a member of the Beausoleil First Nation in Ontario. She's in her second year of the Applied Museum Studies program here and embraces the presence of language and culture.
Honestly, it makes me feel closer to home with all the Indigenous representation here, because that's one of the main reasons why I chose Algonquin, is because it's named after Indigenous people, and it's a breath of fresh air seeing the language incorporated into the campus here, because it makes me feel less alone and more a part of a greater community.
It's part of the Indigenous Pathways project, where Algonquin commits to preserving Indigenous culture and language. In 2022, as a language revitalization effort, 4 campus streets were renamed with animal names of cultural significance. The president and CEO of Algonquin College says it warms his heart to see these changes.
It's very good medicine. It's so important for us to revitalize language and to help people appreciate it. It's the first language of this territory, so for me, it's and with the name of Algonquin College, it makes absolute sense to be doing these events and taking these first steps.
Anita Tedesco is the director of Indigenous Initiatives. She says it's a healing journey.
My mom is a residential school survivor. My dad is an Indian day school survivor. I was educated in Kitiga and Zibi and then eventually in Ottawa. So it's a complete honor for me to walk into work, to walk onto this Ottawa campus and see my nation's language and to see the art that speaks to the territory, that speaks to the nation, that speaks to our people.
According to Tedesco, more Indigenous language, art, and culture will be reflected throughout the school, something Shawaganabe fully supports.
I would love to see more Indigenous languages incorporated into the college, and especially more Indigenous art, because we do have the new ACCE building, and I feel it's very it feels very corporate in that new building, and that building hasn't been indigenized yet. So.
Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And that is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. For news anytime, you can visit our website. That's aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.